Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We are now on Friday, and I've done a whole week with this super deep voice, and it's kind of cool being able to get down here and actually have resonance in this range. But it, it's a bit more, it's a bit more fatiguing to speak like this. We're going to wrap up this week's theme of one-person projects, checking out a project, something called 11th Vibration. The track we're listening to today is titled Meridian. Let's dive into this and see what's going on. The style of bends that we're getting, a little micro bends, I don't know what instrument that is. The bending reminds me of something like a shamisen, but the regular picking does not. Kind of getting a dance vibe off of this though with that rhythm. Interestingly, that's kind of giving me a jet vibe now. All we needed was an instrumental change on that rhythm, and it completely recontextualized the sounds. There's some driving energy here with a chord progression. I'm real curious where we're going to go with this. It feels like we've had a lot of build-up for the whole song. yeah, taking our lead guitar line that we had in our B section and using the synthy A rhythm from, or synthy rhythm from our A section. Yeah, the drums are carrying a lot of weight in this final third. Okay. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, a pretty good atmospheric exploration, kind of almost bordering on ambient, right? And I think um, that's going to be something that I'm going to have to talk about. Is that it sonically comes across as something that, at least to me at the beginning, I thought was going to be more narrative and ended up being more meditative. And those have vastly different composition techniques, intentions, goals. And I don't think I came around to meeting it on its own terms until the back half of the track, and by then I was already a little underwhelmed. So yeah, let's talk about how all this is crafted, what its aim was, and then we'll compare that with what I thought was going to be happening, what my expectations were, and how that led to my initial gut reaction on this. And then we'll take it from there. We'll see where we'll see where I go from there. I don't know. Um so what is the song doing though? So we have a bevy of instruments, electronic and rock. We have a couple of synth ideas, we have a couple of guitars, we have a bass, we have a drum kit. It is primarily what I believe is going to be in rock or metal band project with a keyboard, right? And I know this is only one person, but if this were to be played live, I'm pretty sure that's what the setup would be. Pretty typical rock quartet, sorry, trio. Guitar, well, you need two guitars. So yeah, quartet. Two guitars, bass, drums, and then the keyboardist with probably a couple of keyboards. And these instruments are what everything is based off of. We usually have a small repeating guitar line on the very bottom. It is a series of notes. It is not chords. We're not suspending anything, but it is providing the chordal direction and progression. Then we have a bass, which, as frequently as I heard, it was doing very rigid rhythmic ideas following the chordal progression on the pedal tone, on the root note, and just do, something along those lines. Just like really rigid rhythm, and just following whatever chord they're on, one note for each chord. And then we have the drums in the background, which, like I had mentioned, they're doing a lot of heavy lifting, but they were doing heavy lifting based on what my interpretation of of what the song was. So, in that regard, maybe they weren't doing as much heavy lifting as an ambient track. Again, we'll get into all this later when we explore my disconnect with their intentions, or at least what I think their intentions were. Now, usually we would have all of this, and then, well, we didn't even really talk about the drums. The drums usually have a pretty standard beat per 8 bars, give or take. The song does not usually shift too much in a section. I break this up into an A, a B, and a C. We have 3 distinct riff ideas that happen on the foundation, and that's how I feel the song should be broken up. The riffs underlying the guitar, the foundational guitar, the bass, even some of the synth ideas, they don't really change between these 3 sections. Well, within the section, I should say. Once we hear a riff in A, we're going to continue to hear that on the foundation until we do a transition into our next section. And the synthesizers, like I said, they sit on this as well. They occasionally do some sort of embellishing idea. We don't really hear them playing any chords or melodies or anything like that. For instance, our opening idea, we had that embellishing rhythmic idea. Bump, bump, ba-dum, ba-dum, bump. That rhythmic cadence we had at the beginning that we actually brought back a little bit. I don't remember where that was. Was that the transition from B to C, I think? We brought it back momentarily, though, which I thought was a really neat callback. But that's what the synths do in here. There's a variety of synth tones, but for the most part, they're all embellishing lines. And then we have a second guitar, and this is where we either emphasize and lean into an idea, like where it followed up with the synth rhythm in our A section, or it takes over a melodic concept like we heard in our C section, and helps drive the song forward. The rhythm, the lead melodies, though, they're not supremely lead melodies, though. They do have a cyclical element to them. It's on a wider rotation than everything else. Our guitar riffs are usually 2 bars each, whereas these melodic ideas are usually closer to the 8, or even greater. I don't know. There might have been one that was 16. It gives it a sense of linear direction, but also allows it to loop back on itself, which is really important because it's an ambient track. And that's how all these are composed. From there, we have the idea of the slow burn. Our A section starts out with one instrument, builds it, builds it, builds it, builds it. We bring it all back down. We go quiet for a transition to introduce our new riff so we can build and build and build and build. And after our B section, we break it all down, introduce the new riff, and build and build and build and build. This is just a series of slow burns with ever adding building blocks to it. Nothing gets removed, nothing gets replaced. It's always stacking an idea on top of what came before it. And so we have this song that is a series of peaks and valleys. Peaks and valleys. We build up to a high point, we erase it all and come back down so we can build it up again. And it sounds really great from that angle. The song is extremely palatable. It's super consonant. It is pleasant to listen to. There's nothing in here that is harsh or abrasive. On the other side, though, there's also nothing here that really grabs my attention. And this This is what I was talking about. I had mentioned around the 3.5 minute mark, I said we're building towards something. And the chordal progression here as well wasn't exactly fully resolved either. There was tension being built up in this. And I was like, okay, we're building towards something. The volume's rising, we have more layers. The chord progression is pointing us towards a big climactic moment. Let's hit it. And I mean, we did. We added on another layer, and the volume rising was over. We no longer had a crescendo. We had a set double forte, it sounded like, give or take. Um, and we had this big moment where the lead melody came in and soars over everything. But it didn't feel resolved. Does that make sense? We had the build up, all this tension and energy. We hit a big moment, but it didn't really feel like it got rid of the tension. It was still kind of there. At least to me, it was a bit, well, unresolved. And this was about the time when it hit me. There really hasn't been a strong element of melody here. This isn't a narrative track. This isn't designed to take me on a linear journey across a series of emotions, possibly to tell me a story through music. This is ambient music, which has a very different goal in mind, which is just to be palatable and, in a lot of cases, not draw attention to itself. Ambient music is used for a lot of purposes. You can have it for meditation, you can put it on behind a more taxing task, doing homework or writing an essay or something. Um, and it's again not supposed to be ear catching. It's supposed to be pleasant, but it doesn't draw attention to itself, and it typically is rather static because of that. And that made me to start think, or that forced me to begin focusing a little bit more on the chordal elements. And that's when I noticed the song hasn't really moved anywhere. The emotional resonance of our A section was the same as our B section, it was the same as the C section. We never went anywhere, it just cycled in upon itself with new ideas exploring the same concept. And this would be rather boring if it were trying to tell me a story, if it was trying to lead me on a tale, but it wasn't. It was just trying to be really nice music to listen to that fully explored a single concept in as many ways as they wanted to without really grabbing my attention, which is why the big moments were a sort of resolution to the tension, but it didn't feel like a peak. And it's why the chord progression never changes. And it's why there's not really any sort of lead melody that goes on in here that really, pulls the song in a forward direction. All of the momentum is given primarily from the chord progression. Um, and so when I had mentioned that the drums were carrying a lot of weight, that's because the drums are one of the few things that were changing. Every, I don't know, 8 bars or so, it would change up its drum pattern entirely, not just introduce a fill, but have a completely different beat underneath this static section. And we saw this constantly. And my thought was, nothing else is really changing. The drums are what's keeping this interesting from moment to moment. But the drums only keep it interesting from moment to moment if you're actively listening to it. If you're just vibing with it, you're not looking for change. You just want to be absorbed into the music. To fully immerse yourself in this atmosphere they're creating. So that's where I'm at. I approached the wrong I approached the song on the wrong foot initially. Felt a bit underwhelmed by what it was. I was expecting a little bit more, and once I realized what it actually was, I flipped the script, changed my perspective, and walked away with a much better feeling by the end of the track. Because the A section does feel like the intro to a metalcore song. You introduce the rhythm, you introduce the vibe, and then your A section, well, yeah, that would be your intro. When you get to your A section, the verse, you might bring it down a little bit and do your chorus or do your verse and then ramp it up for your chorus. That's kind of what I was thinking we were going in, thinking the direction we were heading, and it ended up just being an ambient track. So it's really important. Um, I think my big takeaway here, which I'm preaching to the choir if you've been on the channel for a while, is that headspace is very important when listening to music. Sometimes it's not that the music was bad, you just weren't treating it, you weren't giving it the necessary perspective to engage with it properly on its terms. And that's happened to me many times in the past, and it will happen to me many times in the future. It's one of those things about going into this stuff with no prior knowledge. I've never heard of 11th Vibration. When I check them out again, I'm going to know, hey, they're an ambient band, and I will be on the right step with them from the first step. But this time, and I'm glad I caught myself because I could have walked away from this entirely underwhelmed, and this would have been a bit more of a harsh criticism of the song, rather than one I think that's a bit more positive and walking away as a learning experience. As for the emotion of the track, which I think is the most important aspect, it's just wonder. And I think that's phenomenal. Especially with the imagery they were using. I didn't watch the music video all the way through, but there were constantly pictures of, space and animals, wildlife, and just all the ways that there's beauty around us. And it was just a really great reminder of all the wonder that's still left in the world. We know so much of our planet, and yet we still know so little. And it is a wondrous, beautiful place to be. And I think that's just it's a fantastic message, is what I got out of it, but it's also beautiful, gorgeous music to envelop that idea, that childlike curiosity and joy about such a beautiful place. And the music does it so well. Those are my thoughts. 11th Vibrations Meridian. Let me know what you thought. Let me know your comments down below. If you enjoyed it, anything that stood out to you, etc., etc. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. In there, you'll find a link to my music. What's in there? Discord server, ways to support the channel, and so much more. Go ahead and check that out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three. All right, we have a special selection and a creator request today. I'm hoping I can get through them. Apparently, my brain's a bit foggy this morning. I thought I was fine. Guess I'm not. Sickness might finally be digging into me. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.